Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Hannah R. Lyon is a professional editor who has assisted dozens of authors in both fiction and non-fiction, polishing their manuscripts to perfection for successful publication. Over the last 6 years, her quality editing has led to books being featured on #1 bestseller lists, both nationally and internationally. She is president of the Disappropriate Wordsmiths Group, where she mentors other writers in critique, lessons and goal setting for their individual literary projects. Hannah is a guest expert on the topics of writing and editing at virtual and in-person conferences and writers' retreats. She lives with her husband in Salt Lake City, Utah, She lives with her husband in Salt Lake City, Utah, in an old brick house they remodeled by hand to create their own little castle. Her free time consists of indulging in story-driven video games, listening to and collecting classic rock and roll vinyl, and raising her 2 elven sprites of daughters. So let's find out more about Hannah and her editing work. And you'll see by the end of this, Hannah really is a heart-centered editor. She really wants to do the best she can for her writers. This isn't just about typos and spelling mistakes. This is about creating a beautiful product that someone can proudly take to the marketplace and offer up to readers and leave a legacy for themselves. So you'll definitely get this from Hannah, and I know you'll enjoy our conversation today. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, good to be here, Emma.
So I wonder if you wouldn't mind starting just by telling us about your journey to editing and working with writers.
Sure. Well, I always like to start by saying usually most creative people who are into writing or speaking or publishing, they always started by reading books, right? And they love the written word, they love the power behind stories. So where I began was by reading and writing myself. So kind of understanding this world through other worlds that people have created, through the inspiration you can find in memoirs, those kind of things, balancing on fiction and nonfiction side of the world. And I decided to try to figure out, how did somebody take an idea, something they put down on paper, and turn it into a legacy project, a book you're really proud of, something that stands the test of time. I thought that was really fascinating. So I wanted to know what the secrets were, what the formulas were, what the trade was, behind the pages. So that was really fascinating to me. And that's what I decided to dive into, where I could be a partner with my authors and learn how to polish what they'd written into something they could really be proud of when they publish.
Yes. Well, it's such an important role, the one that you do. Yes. Where would we be without you? and so it was it wasn't so much that you wanted to have your name on the front of that book, but rather you liked kind of the behind the scenes, if you like, or doing the polishing and the finessing of the work.
Yes, it's actually quite rare for editors to step out from behind the scenes. I do a bit of ghostwriting as well, and that's where you get, absolutely no credit for your work. Your name is not mentioned anywhere, and you don't really have people come up to you at writers' conventions and say, "Oh, I loved the editing work that you did on this project." It's not something that gives you a lot of attention or accolades. So it's actually kind of breaking out of the mold of what editors do by by saying, yes, I'd love to talk to you about my work. I'd love to speak about it or be on a podcast. So I'm kind of an anomaly here, being willing to come up and tell you a little bit about what I do, but I hope it inspires people to see that, an editor is not just a hammer that comes along and tears apart and destroys what you work on. It's someone who actually wants to learn your story and understand who you are, learn your voice, and be that partner, like I mentioned, with you moving forward with your book. So that part I love.
Oh, that is so reassuring. I think there'll be a lot of people out there listening who kind of almost letting out a sigh of relief to kind of, because there is that fear, and maybe we think back to school with the big red pen and that we're going to get, chastised for getting everything wrong. But knowing that the editor, as you say, is on board, cares about the piece, cares about the manuscript and wants the best for it as well, is that's a lovely place to start from.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm keen to learn a little bit more about actual editing from you and your expertise. And so when somebody says that they are going to do, or they are requesting a comprehensive edit, what does that mean for you?
For me, it's something that's a little bit unique to Castle Lyon editing, and I love to talk about because when I was studying about the editing process, I was learning from other editors, different mentors who are experts in the writing and publishing world, and I found that you usually had to go through multiple rounds of edits. You'd work with a proofreader or a copy editor or a line editor or a developmental editor. Some of them just skimmed the surface of what your computer missed. Some of them would dive really deep into your story, figure out what was missing, what you could add, what you could deepen, those kind of aspects. And each one is like, another layer ripped off of your book, another painful process, another bill, another month and month long period, right, of being able to go through that. And because I work a lot with memoir authors who are sharing their stories of their lives in order to educate or inspire other people, that's really painful to go through all of that multiple times to convince yourself it's worth the time, it's worth the investment. That's why so many people write something, but they don't necessarily get to the point of publishing it. And that always broke my heart when I heard somebody say, oh, I've been working on my book for 10 years. I've been trying to write for 25 years. These women and men in their 60s and 70s who are saying, it's in a box somewhere, but it's not something I'm proud of. It's not something that's worth other people reading. And when I was studying editing process, I thought, well, what if I could train my brain to be able to do all of that at one time? All of those editing processes. And that's what I found I had a gift for, I kind of had a talent for, and that I've refined over the years is I sit down and I'm able to do the line editing process and that developmental editing process at the same time. The left brain analytical formatting side of your book, the creative part of your book with descriptions and dialogue and world building. When I sit down to work on a book, I have kind of that comprehensive overview. So you only have one person, right, who's learning your voice, who's falling in love with your story, who wants to support you through that process and see you succeed and celebrate with you when you publish. So I like to be able to just go through all of that at once, rip off the Band-Aid and walk through it with you so that you're seeing not just the detailed pieces of your book, but also how you can dive into it deeper and make it something better. And that's what the comprehensive editing side of it with me.
So it's really is a relationship that you're building with that author, not just coming in at the end necessarily, putting the red pen through and walking away, but actually building a rapport with that person to help make the book an even better read and journey for the reader.
Yeah, if I do have people come to me and say they just want the red pens, I'll usually recommend somebody else, just because that is something I'm capable of. But I can't help it, diving in a little bit deeper and wanting to provide more feedback for them. So it's just kind of what I choose to specialize in.
Okay.
Because a lot of my listeners, they're new writers, and many of them won't yet be at that editing stage. That'll be something that they'll be coming to.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could just go over the basics with us and just tell us what the different types of editing there are and what element of the manuscript they look at.
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to. So proofreading or line editing for me is they're one and the same. I particularly call it line editing, but that basically involves correcting any spelling or grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, formatting, all of those little things that your computer doesn't always pick up or might actually suggest wrong. Sometimes, it doesn't always get it right. The different programs you can use to be able to take care of those things for you. So if you do know that, spelling and grammar and punctuation, those kind of things aren't your strong suit, or you don't always really focus on them while you're writing, which is fine because, you're doing the hard part of getting the book itself out. That's when you want to look for a proofreader or a line editor. And that developmental editing, or what I like to call content editing, is actually my favorite part, where we do that deep dive into your story, where all of the little pieces have been cleaned up, all the line edits have been polished, but you need somebody to help you make it better, to show you where you can add more, to tell you, oh, you might have missed something here. What if you played with this idea? What if you, tell me what this conversation would look like? And that's kind of where you're turning a good story, a great story you've written, into something that's that legacy, that's a book that withstands the test of time, that you're proud to take off the shelf and share with people. That's our ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for clearing that up, because there was quite a few bits of terminology out there, and so
yes.
And as you've mentioned, there's several things that mean the same, so it's great to have that clarification. Thank you.
Sure.
So I see this a lot, in Facebook groups and things, people saying that they have a great eye for detail, they're brilliant spellers, they know their grammar, they proofread and edit their own novels. They don't need anybody else to do that for them. Mm-hmm. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, and if there's benefits to it, or if there are benefits to having that editor, to taking that plunge and having someone look at your work.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you can and you should edit your book as you go, because you are being able to learn your own writing as you read it. You want to be able to see where your story arc is going, go back and plant some seeds or foreshadowing where you want to be able to lead into things. Sometimes that's really important, and you need to be able to go back and work on your own writing to be able to make that happen. What I do like to say about having a professional look at your book is just the basics of having a fresh set of eyes. Sometimes you can't see that one word you love that you use 10 times on one page. It's just things that little plot holes, right, that you don't see on the page, because in your head it's already there, it's already taken care of, but it might not necessarily reflect as powerfully as it could in writing. Mm-hmm. So when you have that new perspective come in and read through your writing and look at those things for you, and you're open, to the critique, that's kind of the key there too, is being open to growth and improvement. And then those good editors will be able to look at it and show you where those things might be missing. And I'd also say that when it comes to finding a good editor, they will usually have their finger on the pulse of what publishers like nowadays, from submitting things to different publishing companies, what has sold really well, what people are liking or not liking. Those kind of things are really important to look at too. And kind of giving you that perspective from an expert's eyes of what really works and what makes all of your effort worth it when you do have that publication come out.
Yes, such a good point there. Markets change, and I think even as writers, actually, we need to be aware of that. We don't necessarily need to be an expert just yet, but we certainly need to be aware, I think, of the trends that are in our own specific genres. Particularly if you're an indie author, you really really need to be kind of on that and being focused. I was doing a class on preparing your pitch, and the instructor was saying, make sure you know what's been out in the last 2 years that's in your genre, so that you have those good comparables. So such a great point you've made there. I like too what you said about people being open to the critique, and is that a fine line to for you as an editor to tread? And how would you sort of suggest, new writers who are maybe a bit scared, a bit tentative, people do call their books, it's my baby, please be gentle with it. How do you approach it as the editor? But then also, what thoughts would you have for the writer who, yes, it's your baby, but you want it to be the best baby that it can be? So you've got to take that feedback on board.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great question. So I think it's important to remember that critique it's really part of any artist's life, right? Whatever your medium is, in this case being the written word, we have to be open to how we can grow and how we can improve. It kind of goes back to teachers in school, right? You've had bad ones who might have scarred you. You have good ones who've created that lasting, lifelong impression that you never forget. And editing can be a form of teaching in a way as well, where you're coming to someone from a perspective of there's magic in your rewrite. And if you're open to that magic, then it's definitely going to happen. So that's why when I am critiquing a book, I will usually try my best to tell people that what they're looking for is constructive criticism, not just necessarily a critique. So I've had editors come up to me and say, you need to make these changes, but they don't tell me why. And that's kind of the key that's missing, where you're going from just having an instructor or a teacher or a computer program, right, telling you what's wrong, to someone who is walking beside you saying, okay, this is why. And I think it's because that's how my brain works. I'm always open to learning new things or changing things up or growing, but I want to know the reasoning behind it. So if I'm going to tell somebody, okay, this doesn't work, this doesn't belong in your book, and they go, well, I worked so hard to put it there, I want to be able to give them a solid reason as to why I'm giving them that advice. So I think it's important as an editor to explain yourself, and not just tell people what to fix, but how to fix it. So if you are telling them, the sentence is really redundant, or this entire paragraph is one sentence and I have no idea what you're saying, or this is a word that you love, that you need to be able to have some variance in your word choice. So I'll go and give them a list or give them an example or rewrite the paragraph and say, okay, this is an idea. Of course, keep it in your voice, but this is an idea of how you could make this better. And I guarantee you it's going to keep your reader engaged. You're not going to lose anybody. And that way they're not just getting a critique from someone, but they're able to understand why, and then have some inspiring suggestions, as how to actually move forward with it. So that I think softens the blow a little when it comes to the editing process. So if you do find an editor, make sure that they listen to you, make sure they honor your voice, and that they're not just trying to fit you into a cookie cutter mold of what sells. To me, I think the most important part is just making sure that they're happy with the book by the time they share it with the world. So that helps when it comes to editing, and how at times it can be painful.
Yes. There's so many good things in there, and one of them I just want to pick up on is that idea of you said it's not just critiquing, but it's also sort of education as well, and explaining why a change might need to be made. And that was something that really surprised me when I had my first book edited. I did not expect it to come back with a really full document where I could see that the editor had really taken care to look at my work and come back and given me this really detailed document on what was working, which was lovely, but also then, of course, where I needed to make the changes and explaining why. And so it really, really was, I felt, with every edit I've had, it's been a craft lesson, and that I've learned so much with each one, and I didn't expect that. And so for our listeners, I would really encourage you to go and get one done, because you will learn so much. And because it's on your, it's on that person's manuscript, it's not a generic, here's an example from Gone with the Wind or from a Stephen King book. This is your work, and it's all the rules and all the guidance and all your expertise is focused on my manuscript. And that is really special, and you learn such a lot from it. So I really encourage people to be brave and go and do it, and I think it's a really valuable part of your editing service. So thank you for that.
Sure, my pleasure.
What was I going to say? Right, yes, I was going to ask you about as new writers, we're still learning, and we're still making quite rookie mistakes that a lot of people make. And so what are some of the more common ones that you see that our listeners could look out for in their own work?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure some of them might have heard this before, but I think it's the difference between passive storytelling and active storytelling that's the biggest mistake I see happen. And that comes across when you're just getting the story on the page, especially if you're writing nonfiction, where you're trying to spell out what happened to your life in a memoir, and you're just writing out what happened to you. At this age, I lived here, and this is what my mom was like, or this is what happened to me in school, and this is how I overcame this challenge, those kind of things. Or if you're writing out world building in fiction, sometimes we tend to overwhelm the reader with different info dumps of, this is what this entire city looks like, or let me take a chapter here and explain to you how my magic system works. That writing is really great to be able to do, because above all else, no matter what genre you're writing, you have to tell yourself the story first. You have to know what you're going for, right? And hopefully where you're going to end too. And if you're able to write that out and to get that down, that is great. But it usually comes out in a passive voice, because you are just writing the story for yourself to begin with. And that magic, like I said, comes in the rewrite, where you're taking that and you're turning it into an active story. So whenever I see something that's a little too passive, I want people to slow down and to look at what they've written and say, okay, take time with your sensory details here. When you look at sensory details, it's going to shift something from a passive moment into an active moment, where the reader knows what's going on in your head. They hear your inner thoughts. They feel the rain on your shoulders. They hear the cars going by. There's all of those senses that you can play with. And I think that's one of the reasons why writing is such a powerful form of storytelling, is because you have the ability to capture all of those senses for your reader, because they're blind to everything until you share it with them, right? They don't know what anything looks like or sounds like or smells like or anything like that until you share it, let alone what's in your heart and what's in your head, right? Those are the key pieces to really, really juicy writing. So I love to be able to tell people, okay, this is a show me story. You need to show me what's going on here. We need to actively be in your shoes and feel all of those things with you. Of course, you can't do that with every bit of writing, or you'd have a 1,000,000-page long book and you're going to lose people and it's not going to work. So that's something I love to be able to find, is that balance, where there are moments where you need to just passively tell someone something happened, 5 years later down the road, this is where I was living now, or whatever it might be. And then take those really key moments, those turning points, those moments in your character arc that really show the change in you or your heroine or whoever you're writing about. And that is when you shift into real magic in storytelling, is those active pieces of being able to write. So if you look at what those moments might be in your book, where you really need to show those details, I would sit down and focus on those more than anything else, just because they make such a difference. And you can weave the connections and the bridges and everything in between them as you go. But that's really good advice for a beginning author, is just explore what it's like to put the reader exactly in your shoes and play with those different sensory details and just see what happens, see what you can create.
Yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people, when they go back to look at their work, they realize there is a lot of that missing, as you say, because we're just doing the telling. And I've often found with my students that, and actually, I'll be honest, I do this myself as well. I know what's happening in my head. I can see this movie running in my head, but I forget to slow down, as you say, and put it on the page. And so that's something I quite often find myself saying to my students: put it on the page, put it on the page. So it's easily done. We all do it.
True, yes.
And so I can, well, our listeners can't see, but I can see from your expression that you love what you do. And I think it comes through in your voice too. So what are some of your favorite parts about editing memoir or indeed editing fiction?
One of my favorite parts is seeing how the author learns from the suggestions that I give them. It's always key that when an author comes back to you again, that they have less editing to do. And they learn from your suggestions. You can see from their first draft of what they sent you that, things are messy. They're still figuring things out, but they're very brave, and they took that first step of sending it to you and saying, okay, this is my baby, help me make it better. And so you can look at that, and then, by the 20th page, by the 100th page, whatever it takes, you're walking beside them, and then you start to see from what they write that, oh, look at that. They figured out how to be able to write this dramatic dialogue for me. I can hear two distinct voices. I think they have great action beats in the middle. They use really beautiful dialogue tags so I can actually hear each character, different things that they might have struggled with at first. And it's so cool to be able to, by the time you get to the end of the book, you see the confidence they've gained. You've seen all of their hard work pay off, where the story that they wrote is turning into something that they're really going to be proud of and confident with when they share it with the world. Because I've had too many people come up to me where they're speaking, they want their book to open different doors for them in the speaking world or the teaching world or the coaching world, but they leave their book on the shelf because they're embarrassed of some of the things they could have done better. The editor might have told them and they chose not to. That always happens. Or they didn't have somebody who was actually learning their voice and walking with them, that I really love to do. And they just miss things, and they see those things, and it's not something that they want to be able to share. And that's, one of the biggest pains that you can see in an artist is not being willing to take something out and be really proud of it. Mm-hmm. So I love to be able to emphasize that for people and just celebrate with them when they have that book that they're really proud of by the end of it. So that just makes me really happy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, I can relate to that, because I with my students too, when I sort of see when that light bulb goes on, and I can see in their eyes that they've made a connection between, and we do a lot of character work, so the connection between the character arc and the plot line, and when they can see how those two are connected and one leads the other, it's magic. As you say, it opens so much possibility there. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier was, if someone's looking for an editor, they want to make sure that editor doesn't take away the author's voice. So I feel, is that a tricky thing to do? How do you sort of find ways of honoring that author's voice whilst at the same time helping them move forward?
Yes, that's another really good question. I think it comes down to being a good listener for them. When I first start working with an author, before I've even seen their writing, I'll ask them, okay, why are you writing this book? Why is it worth the time and the money and the effort in your life to write this? That's kind of the bedrock. That's the foundation of what they're going for. And if I'm on the same page there, no pun intended, if I'm on that same page with them, then I know, oh, okay, this is their reasoning. This is their drive. This is why they're doing it. And then the next step is asking them, okay, who are you writing it for? Not necessarily the why, but the who of who they're writing the book for. What is that one person in the world that they want to be able to reach? And how would this inspire them? How would this teach them? How would this make a difference for them? How is this a book that they want to share with all of their friends and family? You know, because that's your ultimate goal. But if I have that foundation with them, then I know exactly what they're going for. And when I look at their writing, I'll always keep that in mind. You know, why are they writing this and who is their audience? And when I go through that editing, then I'm able to see what they've created so far that works along those lines, and then what they can add. And of course, the key thing with a good editor is that aside from, you know, spelling and grammar and punctuation, everything else is a suggestion. It's never something that's set in stone. It's not me saying, oh, I don't like this word, so I don't want you to use it. It's a suggestion back to, you know, like what I said before about the reasoning behind it of why I think you should change it. But sometimes my suggestions are stronger than usual. If it's something I really feel like you should change, or you should deepen, or you should even take out, that's always hard. But by the end of it, it's your book. It's your story. It's your message. And I have no agenda based off of what that final product is. You know, publishers might, depending on, you know, the route that you go for publishing, they might put their foot down a little bit harder. But when an editor is really doing their job properly, they're making just suggestions for you and telling you what they think would be really great to do in their personal and professional opinion. But when it comes down to it, you're going to send in the copy of the manuscript to Amazon that you want people to see. Yeah. And so I'm always fine with that. I have no ego about it. It doesn't bother me when people reject a suggestion I have. Anything like that just is not really how I do business. So if I'm listening to you, I know where you're coming from, then we have that foundation together, and it's easier than you might think to be able to make sure that author's voice stays as authentic as possible.
Okay, I love that you take that time with your writers at the beginning to really get to know why this book is important to them. Who is it that they are trying to reach with this book? And I think that's something that I certainly didn't do at the beginning when I started my writing life. And I think a lot of new writers don't, because it does feel complicated. It does feel difficult. It feels a bit abstract. But once you do take the time to think about that, I think it makes a huge difference to the writing that you do, and you, as the author, your understanding of what you're writing and why you're writing it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what about those writers, though, that are, say, who might push back a bit on the comments and questions you've got for them, and are worried that that the critique you're giving, between the lines, what you're saying is that they're really bad writers? And should we be right in thinking that, or is that just our own kind of insecurities coming in?
I think that a lot of the time it comes down to people who are really, really open to critiques or might not be. And there's always a reason behind, you know, whether you want to be a teachable person or you struggle with being a teachable person. That is difficult for some people for whatever reason, you know, their background, their past, those kind of things. But you do have to have some kind of a thick skin when you get into the writing world. And you have to be able to take a critique from an editor or a beta reader, because by the time you put your book out in the world, even though you want everybody to love it, everybody's not going to love it. we want to reach every single person on the planet, right? But that's not a realistic thing. But you do have that target audience in mind, and those people are the people you're going to be able to touch. Those are the people that will be changed or inspired by what you have to share. And I always tell my author, when they struggle with a change, when they are pushing back a little bit more than I think they need to, I tell them, what would your ideal reader be missing? How would you be ripping that person off by not making this as good as it can be? Tell them to step back and to think about that key reader, that focused person that they should be able to always picture in their mind. That is important to remember when you're struggling with a change that needs to be made, or even when some authors can get into that space of, why am I even doing this anymore? Everybody gets to that moment too, where they're saying, it's not worth it. I don't want to go through with it. It's been done before. Whatever you might be thinking, if you focus back on who that person is you're writing for, and what they're lacking if they don't have your unique message to be able to help them or inspire them or whatever it might be, that usually helps a lot with getting through some of those barriers.
That's such a great perspective to come from, to give to somebody, because then it's depersonalizing it in a way. It's not about me as the creator, but it's the person I'm trying to reach. It's about them and what they want, and so it's for the greater good, for the higher good, and that kind of takes it away from being a personal criticism. That's a great question. I'm going to remember that question.
That was very good. Yes, write that one down.
So you mentioned that you work with memoir writers. Do you also work with fiction writers as well, or do you like being with the memoirists?
It was the memoir community and the speaking community and the self-help community were kind of where I got my breakthroughs and my biggest projects to begin with about 6 or 7 years ago. But my favorite thing to be able to do is to bring in fiction authors whenever I can, just because those are the kind of books I like to read, the kind of things I like to write in my spare time. So whenever I am able to bring in fiction authors, I think a lot of the editing process, despite the genre, kind of translates over as far as reader engagement and character arcs and those kind of things that you want to have that keeps people in the story and pulled along with you. So it translates pretty well between fiction and nonfiction, but I always love to be able to dive into fiction worlds whenever I have the chance.
And do you work across all genres, or?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I know that your books are pretty full, but you do have a few spaces for the second half of 2022, and then of course going into 2023. If our listeners are interested, or they've resonated with you, what's the best way for them to find out a little bit more about the work that you do and how you help writers?
Yeah, one of my favorite things I've created on the internet is my website. It took a lot of work, but I wanted to be able to find a place or create a place where I would be able to bring people who just have story ideas, who finished their first draft, who have published books before, just to have that underlying foundation and understanding of what I do. So all of that is on my website, as well as details of services and timing and pricing, as well as the projects I'm currently working on. Anybody who saves the spot with me and dives into editing with me, I want to show you to the world already. I love to be able to put up your picture, the name of your book in progress, any social media or websites you have, so people can connect with you and anticipate your book, as well as a celebration page for when you do publish. I love to be able to have that up there, do live videos for you, be able to just share your story with the world through my website. So it's a great place to see books I've worked on that I'm very proud of, so you can get an idea of what finished products look like after working with me. That's really great. So castlelionediting.com is the place where you can find all of that good stuff.
Wow, that is a lot of good stuff. Oh my goodness, you really do celebrate with and look after your clients. That's wonderful. I've not heard of anybody else doing that. That's really a generosity of spirits as well. I can see then this isn't just a business, this is a life.
Yes, it is. And I love it. So thank you for saying that.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. I've loved finding out more about you and what you do and your perspective on editing and the lovely, beautiful services that you offer. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. It's been great.
If you're a first-time novelist who is struggling to either finish your novel or get those revisions to where you want them to be, then I've got just the thing for you. I have a small group coaching program which runs over 12 months, and over the course of that program I will help you fix those plot problems that you've been struggling with. I'll help you get under the surface of your characters so you really get to know them and what's driving them. And crucially for you, I give you that self-belief that you need to get you through the roller coaster that is writing a novel so that you can carry on, get to the end and get your book, your story out into the world so it can change people's lives. If that sounds good to you, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, I know I can help you get to where you want to be. So book a call with me. Let's have a chat and see if we are a good fit for each other. If you're interested in doing that, then go to emmadesi.com/story builder. I look forward to chatting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers. Hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.